that's the case, if that's what it takes for me to be a person, because at that stage, right, we all agree that once I was born, my mother could just take a rock and bash me in the head, or at least as science, as you do it now, they can't say, oh, well, you're just too small, or you actually might end up being brain damaged. Let's take something and let's put that in you. So we all can agree that the moment I was born, you couldn't do that. But then we're saying that, okay, well, it's the law then that makes me a person. The law says that once I'm born for whatever, I'm a person. But if that's the case, I'm always thinking about the Holocaust or places like that. Where the laws, or slavery, for instance, where it was the law that decided who was a person and who wasn't. It was legislation that decided, and it took all types of fighting and all types of things just to make some kind of case that the law is wrong and that these people are persons.
Well, I think two things. One, I appreciate you saying that and sharing that, and I think what you're getting at is a very personal experience that happened to you, and I don't think for a lot of people making these decisions, it's impossible to divest themselves of their personal experiences from what they're doing, especially with something as touchy. But we live in a society that's governed by law, and so you're making a distinction there. The Supreme Court, up till now, has said we cannot make any decisions on life, that science itself and everybody else has not been able to reach consensus on what defines life, particularly during gestation. And so I know you were, but your life was decided outside of the womb.
Outside the law? No, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you,
but you did.
Oh, you were, sorry. I'm sorry, you're right, I did. Go ahead.
Well, I don't want to get into a debate. I appreciate your comments, and what I'm saying is we do live in a society in which that position that you have is a perfectly valid legal position that you can advocate for. And I encourage you to advocate for the position you most believe in. I encourage other people to advocate for the position we most believe in, and let the law, because that is the world we live in, where laws get to make decisions about whose life matters. And we hope that as time goes on, our laws improve, our society improves, and that we get better. Now, I think you and I might disagree on what exactly that means, and I think that's great. And I appreciate that this is such a personal decision for you, and I think that, unfortunately, we can't have a completely lawless society that makes none of those decisions.
Well, I think if you talk about laws or legality, I don't think it's ever legal for, even if you want to say, like, okay, like this fetus is a person from the moment of conception, when is it ever okay for a person to use another person's body as life support for 9 months? That's like the way I kind of see it.
Yeah. Do men have reproductive rights? I'm always curious about that. Like, do they have any rights at all? Like,
I don't understand the question.
Meaning it takes two to have children, right? For it to be okay. And obviously there are laws, because just like you said, and you're right about that. It's like it's right, legit. You're right. It's like the laws are, they're so murky, and they're the ones that make the decisions, because it's like, well, if you choose to have a baby, or someone chooses to have a baby, regardless, let's say I'm a man, and I didn't want it or not, once she has it, which she has the right to do, I'm responsible in so many states to provide and take care of that child, and if I don't, I would go to jail. And the premise of that is because of my genetic responsibility to that child. And we all can agree on that, I think, but like I said, it's just murky laws. Like I said, I don't understand it, so I won't say that I do.
I'm sorry. You're asking if a man has the right, but if you were raped and pregnant, you got pregnant from being raped, does he have the right to choose whether or not you were forced to have that child? And that, for me, that's it for me, for that point. If you're raped.
What are the percentages of abortions based on rape?
1 to 2%, so you're looking at about 32 to about 42,000 abortions a year are performed with those numbers.
Okay.
Those people matter. Those women
Now
matter.
you're right. Those women do matter. They absolutely matter.
And I think what we're getting into is a very, very fine parsing of a lot of details of laws and those kinds of things. And one of the things that I encourage you, everybody in here, is I think our legislators need to hear from everybody in this room about their beliefs, about their stories, so that we don't have people on whatever side it may be making decisions based on public polling, or have decisions based off of interest groups, that they're making the decisions that they think best represent the constituents of their districts, of their states. So one of the things I would say is all these concerns that you have, which are valid concerns for you and troubling you, I think are things that you should take to the people who are running for office and ask them and bring those discussions to them, as should everybody in this room. And so I welcome your contributions to that. I don't want to get into all the kind of like finite little pieces of legislation. I think it's great, and I think there's a place for that. And I talk about it in course. We do like 3 weeks, kind of contemplating a lot of these decisions, because I think one of the things you point to is abortion. I hate pro-choice for the most part, and I hate pro-life a lot of time, because I don't think there's two sides to it. I think there's hundreds of sides to it, and that it's a very, very complex thing. That can't just be turned into a sign or a slogan.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't really, okay, so like I know people, several people at my age, whatever, that have had abortions, and like, I feel like it's probably not usually covered in health insurance, and I feel like a lot of people probably don't apply for the money that you talk about, so like, especially like if you like work at Planned Parenthood, like that's cool, because like, what I'm curious about is like, so if someone like my age walked in, and like I don't want my parents to know, or I don't have like the money to pay cash for it, like I feel like that has to happen a lot.
Well, it depends on your age. States have laws governing who can have abortions without parental consent or parental knowledge. State of North Carolina, you have to be 18 to have an abortion without parental consent. So if you're under the age of 18, you can't have an abortion without parental consent in the state of North Carolina. South Carolina, 17. Some states have, you have to inform your parents, not necessarily have consent. I think a lot of us probably saw a really troubling case, and I'm going to forget the state, so I do apologize, where a girl was part of the state welfare system, was under the age of 17, and found herself pregnant and wanted to have an abortion, didn't have parents. Right? She was in a foster home, foster care, and the judge said, well, you don't have any parents to sign for you, so you can't have an abortion. So she wasn't able to make that decision because she didn't have any parents. So every state's a little bit different. So if a patient came in and was under the age of 18, and again, I volunteer, so I want to make sure that the people who really are there every day doing the work, I want to give all the credit to them. But if they're under the age of 18 and they come in and they want an abortion, there's nothing we can do, given the laws of the state. Once they're over 18, then there's a host of choices available to them.
Percentage-wise, like, it's like, so like if I were 21, like, I guess what I'm saying, I just wonder, like, do most people pay for it out of pocket? Like,
Yes.
is that what most people do?
Yes.
Well, and also, I know someone personally who was like just short, like, you know, a couple $100s, and she was like, gosh, you know, this is terrible. I can't, you know, I've come this far, and the Carolina Abortion Fund had stepped in, and they actually called her. So there are definitely resources and places where you can go to get that done. But just to be mindful of time, I just want to take a couple more comments and then wrap things up. Yeah.
Does Planned Parenthood perform abortions?
Yes. Not all, but some do, yes.
I think it just depends. There's different Planned Parenthoods in the state of North Carolina. I believe only one of the Planned Parenthoods, if I'm wrong, so I believe only one of the Planned Parenthoods in North Carolina actually performs abortions. There's 4. Are they all Planned Parenthoods? Dr. Chris Clinic.
Durham, Fayetteville, Cambridge, Grace.
I'm not answering your question fully, which I always dislike doing. It depends on the clinic. The clinics can decide whether or not they would like to perform abortions. Some do, some don't. I speak for the one here in Wilmington, and they do 1 day a week.
Does the price for the abortion range based on the semester that the woman is in?
Yeah, so it's, the procedure gets more expensive the longer you go. So in the film, they actually had a price listing, and it was like in the first trimester, it was anywhere between like $200 to $700, and then after, in the third trimester, it got up to $10.
there's different procedures performed.
Yeah.
If you're under 8 weeks, I think they go to usually 8 weeks, you can choose to have abortion performed by pill, which still requires going to the clinic and getting the pills, but the actual releasing of uterine tissue happens when you're at home. So you get 2 pills and you can do that. And then the in-between is kind of done in the clinic there. And then that's going to range from, like you said, yearly 350, 400, up to as much as what different states are charging. And that's going to vary on their insurance, what they have to charge for anesthesia, all kinds of things are going to impact that cost.
Do you know if it's like available with like the student health plan or anything? Is there like any way to make that possible?
I think at one time, and if I'm misrepresenting that, I think that's a good question to ask. I believe at the time that you decide on your student insurance, it's not covered per se, but that you can check an opt-in box that says, yes, I would like this to be part of my coverage. And so if you do that at the time that you sign up for your insurance, then it can be covered. If you didn't sign opt-in at that moment, then it's not covered.
Would that change like your premiums or any of those costs?
No, not at with the insurance plans here.
Okay, so it'd still be like, so you're still paying the same whether you're opting in or opting out, even though you'd be getting the additional services of the abortions if you opt in.
Yeah,
You're
and
still paying the same price.
I could be wrong about that, because again, use of state-backed insurance plans to access any kind of abortion services is something that's currently in that miasma of opinion and laws and
So like
those types of
right now, like are there like women that have the student health plan, are they covered abortions if they've opted in?
I believe, and if I am incorrect, then I apologize, I believe that if you chose to opt in to the coverage when you signed up for your student insurance, if you thought to ask the question, and you got the form, and you opted in, then you have some portion of the procedure covered.
And you can do that like at the Planned Parenthood in here in Wilmington.
Right. I believe, and if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I believe that's what it is. One last question.
I had a friend tell me that like all abortion doctors were like a guy named Kermit Gosnell or whatever. Who is that guy and like what's the deal? Like, is this just like some random dude or?
Kermit Gosnell was a doctor in Philadelphia, and what he was doing was performing really unlicensed, unsanctioned, backdoor abortion services for women in Philadelphia. And what happened is people found his clinic, found some of the horrific things he was doing to women, and he was arrested, shut down, all that kind of stuff. There's been some debate over what this proves, the existence of his clinic. What I would say is that Pennsylvania, for a long time, became one of the first really testing grounds for strict abortion laws. Governor Friend, during the time, enacted some of the most strict abortion regulation in the United States. It was one of the first states to really cross that line, almost become entirely abortion-free state, was actually Pennsylvania. There's a really good documentary called The Last Abortion Clinic. You can actually stream it through UNCW, so you don't even have to leave your computer. That kind of covers some of that. So what some people will say is that those kinds of restrictions that have made it to where women can't use their insurance, can't go to doctors, can't access it, there's nothing in their neighborhood, would be desperate enough to go see somebody like him who would perform it for maybe less money, although sometimes they take advantage of the money, but this is what's available.
So he's just like an outlier.
Yes.
He's not, I mean, also, like, it sounds like he's not a licensed.
I thought he was.
I think he's a licensed physician. I do believe that. I could be wrong, but I do believe he was a licensed physician. I would say that's the outlier. I mean, clinics, abortion clinics, you mentioned trap laws, are some of the most heavily regulated medical centers. There's regulations that apply to them that don't apply to any other facilities that provide medical services. I mean, you guys, I'm going to guess, but some of you have probably been like, crap, I have to go to urgent care. I did this, I hurt this, what's happening? This hurts, and you go there, and the amount of scrutiny and oversight for those urgent care centers that you take care of, that we use on a regular basis, is almost nil compared to the amount of oversight that most